where we might be going, but that's kind of what's exciting about this. And the great thing is that we've got a guide today who is experienced in taboo talk, and that is Ladan. And Ladan, there you are. This is great. I've really been looking forward to this. For folks, I how I was introduced to Ladan was she would host these taboo talks on a variety of topics, not related to aging, but just anything taboo that might be difficult talking about. And we'll learn more about this. And I remember first meeting you, Ladan, and we were brainstorming. I go, nobody, I mean, number one, growing old is a taboo talk. People just don't want to talk about it. And that may be one of the rabbit holes we go down today in this discussion. But Ladan, before we dive into this, let's get to know you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you kind of stumbled into this interesting segment of talking about things that people don't want to talk about.
Absolutely. But first, let me just say, Steve, it's an honor to be on your show. I feel like I'm going to be interviewed by a celebrity in the senior world. So thank you for having me on. And it has just been a pleasure working up to this, talking about what we're going to say. And I promise to behave as much as I can. People that know me know that that's sometimes an issue. So hopefully I won't say any bad words. Anyway, so yeah, I am an immigrant, moved from Iran when I was 4 with my parents and followed the immigrant path of, I got a master's degree in international finance. I was supposed to be a banker. I accidentally had a 20-year telecom career, but my real passion has always been planning events. So 5.5 years ago, took the big leap, very scary leap, and started my own event business. A month into it, I went to a funeral and I had a calling at the funeral to not just be an event professional for meetings and other things that I was planning to do, but to help in a space where I found that there weren't very many event professionals that helped. So without meaning to get into the death and dying world, I felt because of this calling, I began starting to have conversations, difficult conversations with people about death and dying. And there are so many people that just can't go there, right? And I can really tell. But I noticed that I was the type of person people could open up to about difficult topics as a young person, even. But when I was pregnant, I took a prenatal yoga class and I had zero issues raising my hand and asking the instructor, like, why is this happening? Why is that happening? And afterwards, the women in class would all come up to me and go, I was too embarrassed to ask that. I was too afraid. And so I think part of it is that I have no filter and no fear of being embarrassed about asking something. And then because I'm not a very judgmental person, people tend to open up knowing that, one, they can trust me with what they're about to say, and that I won't make any judgment about what their thoughts are. So anyway, so 4 years ago, I started having these conversations as an organized way to let people have organic conversations. The first 2, 3, 4 were in person, and then COVID hit. So I moved it to an online platform and found that it's wonderful because people can join from everywhere and discuss different topics. And can't wait to talk about today's topic with you.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things before we dive into that. So, from a broad perspective, first off, folks, and this goes for any of the discussions we have, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know where we're going to go. And there can be discussions that we have on death and dying or different ways of caring for folks that might not be your cup of tea. Okay. But today, because the title is Taboo Talks, we might say something that might offend your sensibilities or what have you. And so that's number one, it's not being done intentionally. Number two, and hopefully that we just have a conversation. But I like saying this is that if you find that we're going down a rabbit hole that is something you're not comfortable with, walk out of the room or just log out, okay? Because I don't want anybody feeling uncomfortable, but just know that this is not intentional. But I don't have a crystal ball here. The other thing is the way that these discussions are best is when they're live and interactive. So make sure you can comment in chat. You can use the Q&A feature. The other thing is the Q&A feature, I believe, has an anonymous category there, so that there would be no recording of your question or what have you. So a couple of little things that might make our dialogue interesting today. And Joe says it's a free country and a free discussion. If anybody's concerned, it's easy to tune out. All right. And I'm glad Joe's here. I know Joe, and he's a great guy to have around on Taboo Talk. But before we dive into aging topics, so, you know, I love how you organically slid into the space. What are some of the topics that you covered that were on your general Taboo Talk?
Yeah, so the first two were on death and dying. Oh, they won't cancel me. I'm sorry. I'm so excited. Please don't. The first two were on death and dying, and I will say those were two amazing conversations because we got into what our ideas were about the afterlife, and we talked about our own experiences on having lost a loved one and grieving and that type of thing. We laughed, we cried. It was an amazing conversation. And then the next one was on domestic violence. And I always partner with someone that has more knowledge than me. So I always have a co-host of somebody running basically a nonprofit because her own story was, related to that. And then we did one on pet grief, because that's a big one, right? Sometimes we can grieve a little harder for animals, maybe, because they just give us love. There's not as many complications as grieving a human, right? And then we did a mental health for entrepreneurs session. And then when COVID hit, the first one I held was, I wanted a place where people could complain about COVID, because I was being the totally optimistic, it's going to end soon person. And then all these negative people were like, no, it's going to be years. And I'm like, well, they were right. I was wrong. But I did want to talk about, just it's okay to complain. And one of the people on the Zoom, she complained that she was just really pissed off that her 50th birthday was not going to take place the way she wanted it to. And so that's where I started doing my first virtual events. And I threw her a 50th birthday virtually. And I turned 50 in February. And this is where
that's the crown there.
I want to explain that. I've been celebrating the last year in my 40s by getting really ready for this party. But anyway, so one of the most impactful, couple of the most impactful conversations were about gender identity. Another one was a conversation that I didn't want to run alone. I brought in a lot of people, and we discussed race and racism after everything that was going on with George Floyd and the whole movement in this country that people were talking about. And that was an intense conversation. And so a lot of these are silly, like we talk about things like taxes, like that you wouldn't think that's taboo, but to me, that's a big taboo that I would love to have more conversations about how people file their taxes, just because it's something that if I can share with someone my knowledge about, please stop going to the tax preparation people and paying up for, paying no fees or whatever, but they give you your tax return early. Come on now, like, don't do that. But like, if you don't have the opening, you're not just going to walk up to someone and say that. So anyway, these are some of the topics, but I'm open to having any kind of topic conversation. So
I love it. And actually, I just ironically, I discovered something similar when we did our talk on Let's Talk About Death Over Dinner. And then people started talking about death cafes, but a lot of the conversation was that I can't talk about death with my spouse. I can't talk about it with my kids. They say, Mom, be quiet. Don't do that. I think one of the interesting things about this format of Taboo Talk that you've created and the discussion that we have today is we all try to talk about this. So for example, if I'm at my Thanksgiving table and I want to talk about, tax returns or death and dying or, having sex over a certain age, the people in that room may not want to listen to me. And now it may be get upset. And now, oh, geez, that's a taboo talk. The cool thing is everybody who's tuning in to this discussion today, which is called Taboo Talk on Aging Topics, or your Taboo Talks, they want to be there. And and what we discovered on that death talk was, okay, so you don't think you could host a death over dinner. Your husband doesn't want to talk about death, but you can go to a death cafe where everybody is there because they want to talk about death. And so I don't know, now that I'm thinking about this, I think taboo talks, it's all related to who the audience is. So if you're a stand-up comedian, and I know you do some stand-up comedy, and you have an offensive stand-up act, and you just give it out on the corner of a street, that's going to be taboo. But when people are paying 20, 30 bucks, $300 a ticket to see a comedian, that's not taboo. That is what they want to hear, and they want to reflect on that. So anyways, okay. And Joe is says many families don't talk with their children about finances, investing, and long-term care. I agree. I think that's probably one of the at the top of the list. It might not seem like it's offensive, but it is so hard if you've grown up in a family where you can't talk about your parents' finances to have those discussions.
Yeah, no, my dad has a PhD in economics, and my mom almost finished her PhD, everything but dissertation, right? She's an IRS agent. These people taught me to talk about money early on, right? They talked about put your money into a retirement account, do this, do that, right? But now they're in their mid 70s, and it's time to start thinking, see what's happening for this next stage of life. And my dad was complaining to me last month saying, your mother wants to buy a Tesla. She wants to borrow from her retirement to buy a Tesla. And I'm like, Dad, it's not borrowing. You are retirement age. Like, you saved all of this money. Please, what are you saving it for? And he was so angry at me for even bringing up, like, getting involved with their finances, of saying, what'd you save it for? Please spend it now. But they're cheap, they're frugal people. So, but it's amazing. Everyone has their views on topics and their fears and their superstitions. One of the things I saw someone mention Death Cafe. I originally wanted to hold a Death Cafe, and that's what my whole intention was. But when they said that I couldn't bring people on to talk about, like, a funeral home talking about options or organ donation, like, because it's a nonprofit and it's a wonderful organization, I felt like what I wanted to do wasn't going to fit in that mold. And I was complaining to a business owner saying, I really don't know what to do. I was going to have a death cafe, which, by the way, when I mentioned it to my sister, she thought I was literally opening a cafe and I was going to sell, like, cookies that are death related. I'm like, no, crazy. It's wonderful organization. But anyway, I told this businesswoman, I said, I can't do the death cafe. And she goes, they don't own the concept of death and dying. So that's when I created my own version of it. And then it was supposed to be just death and dying, but there's too many other taboos to talk about. And
exactly.
And one of the things that the original founder, I think, of Death Cafe, there was like a meme, and it said, just like talking about sex doesn't make you pregnant, talking about death doesn't make you dead. But there are people that are afraid to plan and get a will because they feel like once I get a will, I'm going to die, right? So I definitely want people to be open to the one thing that you and we all have in common. Everyone talks about death and taxes as a constant. Well, there's a lot of people that don't pay taxes. So, but the constant and the one thing we all have in common is that we all are going to die one day. And we should definitely plan it out to be the way we want it, right? Like I was 22 when I had my first vision of what I wanted my funeral to be like. I did not want my funeral to be what I had seen growing up of my grandfather's funeral and everyone's wailing and crying. And I knew I didn't want people to wear black. And I wanted the song by Metallica, Fade to Black. And I thought everyone had their funeral song. It wasn't until later in life that I realized that they don't. And I actually have a playlist now. So anyway, so these are some of the things that when talking now openly, I found out my friend wants a Viking funeral.
And that's where you, I think it's like you have a boat, a canoe or something, and you set it on fire and let it float out into the
like you shoot an arrow and then it catches on fire. And so here he is joking with me and his wife and saying that that's what he wants. And the wife was just going along thinking that, oh, this will never happen. Well, a couple years back, Maine passed a law and it's now legal to have a Viking funeral. So that was my gift to my friend to let him know that he could indeed do that. And his wife was not happy with me. But so I'm noticing in the chat, some people are adding their funeral songs, their death songs.
I love it. What a great,
let's keep that going. I love that idea.
And you know, and even if you've not even shared your funeral song with anybody but this group, this is a great time to reflect on that. Let me share with you, because you're talking about like the Viking funeral. This is one of my favorite types of funerals. It's the surfer's funeral, and I'm not sure if you all can see this, but you know, when a surfer passes away, the community comes out. And I mean, some of these are, you know, like pro surfers here with thousands of people, but they form a circle and they spread his or her ashes in the ocean. And then they have a great day surfing with their friend. And, you know, it's like, you know, some people, I've brought up these topics to some people and they're like, oh, I could never do that. Like that, you know, it's breaking a tradition. That's okay. But for some folks out there, having permission to sort of break a tradition and sort of like, hey, this is how I'd like to be remembered, or Dad, I bet you know, you loved hiking on this trail. You know, what do you think about that? Patricia Dubroff says death doulas help and ask hard questions and make the plan possible. You know, if for folks that are not familiar with the profession of end of life doulas, it's sort of you're hiring somebody that is sort of helping you in a variety of ways in this area, but they're your one-on-one guide through this stage.
Yes, I just want to also mention another reason why I think I'm okay with talking about this stuff, and also why I absolutely love working and being surrounded by seniors. I call them seasoned adults or professional adults. When I was 22, I ended up befriending a woman. I had no idea what her age was. And we talked every day because she worked on the campus at the grad school that I was at. And she would always ask me how I was doing. And for Thanksgiving, her daughter and son had me over to his house. And the daughter asked me, sweetie, how old are you? And I said, I'm 22. And she goes, how old do you think my mom is? And I said, I don't know, 55. And she said, my mom is 72. So one of my best friends is 50 years older than me. And as I mentioned, I'm turning 50. She's turning 100 in April. And through all the years of being a bestie with her, the things that she's comfortable talking about with me, and you know, she's had 4 husbands. It's really amazing based on her generation. But one thing she confided to me was that her family has already made arrangements to have her cremated. And she was burned when she was 15. She was deathly afraid of being cremated. And I said to her, I'm like, Marilyn, why haven't you told your family? I don't want to be a burden to them. And it just, and it's not my story to tell to her family members that, hey, she doesn't want this. So I've kept my mouth shut all this time. But knowing that she's living this end of life stage of, well, now, the dementia is really bad, but knowing that this is something she's thought about, she doesn't want this. And we have to be open to sharing this. This is part of the beautiful thing of we've lived this amazing life. It's our life. We have to take responsibility for, even if it is uncomfortable, we need to tell people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you don't talk about it, nobody's going to know. And okay, Anna has a great question, comment, not just for Ladan, but for all of us. And if anybody has any ideas or suggestions, throw them into chat. Raise your hand. Let's make this interactive, folks. But she says, in Ladan's experience, why do boomers generally not want to think or plan about their aging journey? And one thing that I'm going to sort of put an asterisk by that, I get what you're saying, Anna. It seems like all the boomers are sort of delaying and I'm not ready yet and they don't want to have it. But just remember, like, none of us I'm actually a boomer, and I right on the tail end. And so none of us really like being stereotyped. That's why a lot of people don't like to be called a senior. We don't like to be categorized, but there are a lot of people that don't want to think about the aging journey. Any thoughts on that, Ladan?
Yeah, so I actually have a different thought on it. I think boomers have, and you don't look like you could be anywhere close to a boomer, Steve. So,
well, that's another thing. We got to break these stereotypes.
That's such a good point. You did talk to me about this before, but you look good, and we all look good, right? And we should embrace that, right? So, before we talk about that, before we got on, I was like, oh my God, I have like wrinkles and all this. And then I thought, thank God I have wrinkles. It means I smile a lot. And I actually love it when I tell people that I'm about to be 50, not just to hear like, oh, you look so young, but because I'm just so thrilled that I made it to this. But anyway, so my view on it is the generation before the boomers, like with my friend Marilyn, I guess they call that the greatest generation, right? They're the ones that don't want to speak up and say what they want. I think we're all in denial that we're going to die one day. At least some of us, maybe not as much as others, but nobody wants to, like, I need to finish updating my will, right? But I don't want to do that. I'll be okay. I got some time, right? But the truth is COVID should have taught us all that we don't know, right? But I think boomers are a little different, that maybe they still care how much other people, like, they don't want to be a burden to other people. But I look at it like John McCain might not have been a boomer exactly, but I got the idea for the funeral pre-planning program from watching John McCain's funeral. What an amazing control freak, if you ask me, that he outlined every single detail. Good for him. 1 week long funeral, amazing, who could speak, who wasn't allowed to be there. And I think that if we're brave enough to do that, that's the way we should all do it. Because what I hear from people is when they've planned the celebration of life or memorial reception funeral for their loved one, they're always curious, did I do what they wanted, right? What better way to outline what you want than actually saying it or writing it down before the time comes? And it's difficult, but imagine how difficult it would be for your family not to know that you had $1 million in crypto. You didn't leave the wallet details, or that you had a life insurance plan nobody knew about. Like, that's even more difficult. Imagine what you're doing to your loved ones when they have to spend a year dealing with all your end of life things because you were too afraid of death to mention that it's all in this place, right? So we got to do this. We got to be fearless.
No, we can't be afraid. Okay, but Lee, or Anna says, I get this, but why are we in denial? Anna, I have an idea, but I'm curious what the rest of the community thinks about this. But one of the reasons I think that we many times we're in denial is that, you know, we see that not everybody gets dementia, or that not everybody gets has mobility issues. And we are just, I think we have hope that I'm going to live to 90 years old. I'm going to go to bed one evening and I am not going to wake up, and I'm going to be, and that's going to be me. And because it's so difficult for people to say, well, I guess I could get dementia. Let me talk to my family. Let me investigate what type of care is out there and let them know. I think that's one of the things that I've observed in these conversations. I was going to say, Lee wanted me to, she says, I'd like to see a poll on the ages of the people in this webinar. So Lee, your wish is my command. I'm going to throw a poll up there, and if y'all want to participate in it, you can, and hopefully that will go live, and then we might chat a little bit about that if we get some results. I think I put it up there. Does that, do y'all
Does it pop up? Because I don't see a poll.
Oh, well, you're a panelist, so it might not be there. Okay, here, save. Okay, so now I hit launch, and then I think we should see it.
There it is.
Okay, good. So yeah, fill that out when you get a chance, folks, and we'll have a little conversation about our ages and our different viewpoints. Okay. Lee says, I love this, Lee. Sex, be your own lover first. Yeah, now we're getting taboo, what people would think is taboo, but it's just natural being a human, right?
And I was hoping we would talk about sex, because we got to get a little, crazy here. But
yeah.
Why is it that when they have movies and they show some of these older actors like in bed with each other, like this really offends people? Like they think that after a certain age, people aren't doing that, right? So we need to be continuing. And I think that things are changing. We do have more movies now. I mean, the baby boomers, the silver tsunami, we're going to see more and more of this. All the commercials for Cialis and everything, Viagra and movies. And we're starting to talk about the fact that, I previously would have never imagined that my grandmother and grandfather, like when I was in my 20s, that people that old would have sex, right? But now I'm, can't wait to be 80 and running around and still being frisky, right? So it's amazing, but I feel like we can change people's views. And part of my view changing was everything I've learned about independent living, retirement homes, assisted living, on how STDs are so like crazy because they don't have fear of getting pregnant. So they're just not protecting themselves. But this is not something anyone ever outside of our community, I think, would talk about or hear about. I think it is wild, right? Like, so I think it's good. I want my kids to know, maybe not my 14-year-old, but my older children, my child that's older, like to know that this is a healthy thing, and to be thinking about all your life, your sex life, not just your crazy college years and newlyweds, but when you're 70, right? We should all be talking about it.
Oh yeah, and also, like, I've been on a few discussions related to sex and growing older, and one of the things that that always comes out is that sex is different as we evolve, from teenagers to as we go through the chapters of life, it evolves, and when we're older, it changes too. But one thing that there's a term for it, but it's a term that relates to the fact that kissing a loved one at age 80 has much more meaning than, in your 40s and 50s, because you have more awareness that your time may be shorter, and so that just a kiss can mean more than it ever meant before.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
not to
That's such a
jump
good point.
not to jump off the sex talk, we can always jump back there, but Patricia, it has a comment in there, and I like this one because she's talking about her friend who's 100 years old and has accumulated all these assets and needs some assistance, but refuses to spend money on that. And I think this could be classified as a taboo talk, and I think a lot of it is more of a reminder that to let adults make their own mistake, like at some point, it's hard as adult children and friends and next door neighbors. It's like, oh, she's fallen 5 times and she goes to the hospital every day, and everybody's offering assistance. And sometimes we just need to let people fail, and it's very hard to do that. But drawing that line in the sand in to that, it can be really challenging.
I think it's the same thing with us trying to push our kids to be something that they're maybe not, right? How many parents push their kids to go to college and the kid drops out and everything else, and there's disappointment, but that's the kid's path, right? It's the same. Your parents, they're on their path. Just because you think, I love some of these independent living communities that wine and dine me as a senior care person, right? So I want my mom to move into one. My mother is like, you will not put me in one of those places. She still views it as, nobody's putting you there, Mom. It is fun. They have activities. They have all these things. But it isn't up to me to decide. I can decide I want to do that when I'm older. I'm not going to push that on my parents. As cool as they are, I could guide her to maybe taking a tour to seeing just how awesome they are. But it's not, it's not my life to try and control. So.
All right. Well, this is pretty cool. I don't know if you all can see this on the. I'm sharing the results. Ladan, are you able to see the different ages of everybody?
I can't, no.
Okay. Well, I can, and we've got a bunch of folks on this call. Somebody's in their 90s. We've got a bunch of people in their 70s. The youngest number I see so far is somebody who's 35, but most are in their late 70s and 80s. We've got a bunch in 50s, a few in the 40s. Wow, I am thrilled that 96,
wow,
82, 80, 93. Wow, I mean, this is so cool that I would have never have guessed that, because we have a large professional community. I'm going to actually I'll put that in sort of with nobody's name next to it, because I'm seeing people's emails addresses, but I'm going to download this, and on the recording link I'm going to put the average age and the different ages that were participating in this, because number one, hey, let's just blow every stereotype out of the window that technology is not something that somebody over 50 or 60 can use. This call that we're talking to, there's more people over age 70 than there is under the age 70, and we got 3 or 4 people in their 90s.
Awesome.
Okay, okay, here we go. This is a good sex one here, and it's anonymous too. This is another great thing about this discussion. And the person says, when I watch movies and seniors are having sex, I wonder about it because intercourse is very painful for me. I'm a breast cancer survivor. I cannot use vaginal estradiol. Olive oil and such have been recommended, but they just don't work for me. There's a Viagra for men, but what about for women? It's just very sad. Number one, thank you for sharing that. Okay.
Yeah.
number two, I'm hopeful that there might be somebody in the audience that has some suggestions and that might be able to help. But Laden, I mean, I think that this is not this is unique potentially to being older, but through our lifetime, there are a variety of different chapters of where we may have challenges having sex. Any words of wisdom or thought on what this person is concerned?
Yeah, I also want to commend this person for asking the question. And I'm so thrilled that there's a forum here with almost 60 people that that person can ask that, right? Because we can't find out information without asking. And sometimes, like I was mentioning, my classmates were afraid to ask. So someone else asking it helps answer a question. So my view on this is I don't have a medical degree and I don't have the knowledge, but I have heard about things that can be inserted vaginally that will help. So that I think would be a good conversation to have with one, potentially if there's any friends you have in your age group that may, like, because I'll give the example. I'm menopausal. I'm perimenopausal. Before I entered this stage, I didn't even understand that perimenopause is all the time up to it, and that menopause is literally something that's one day after 12 months of not having your period. Menopause is one day, and then you're postmenopausal. How would I learn this? My mother didn't know this fact. She would never sit down and talk to me about this. The reason I know this is I talk about menopause and perimenopause constantly. Like I go out, I tell people I've had 2 taboo talks on it. And because I'm willing to have, and I have a platform where I can ask people, I have learned so much. And I'm now in a menopause support group called the Hotties. It's
Wow.
awesome. And in
Okay.
that, I actually met a woman who works as a nurse practitioner, and I guarantee she would have an answer to your question. So if you want to send me an email or something, I can get an answer for you. But yeah, that's the type of thing where I feel like, just as when I was pregnant and I was like, why do I have hemorrhoids? And understanding why and being not afraid to admit that this happened, because it's embarrassing, right? And so, and yeah, pelvic floor issues. I saw someone write in the chat. I had a whole taboo talk on the pelvic floor, and I'm connected to multiple people. One that's a yoga specialist that can help with pelvic floor issues for men and women. And then there's a doctor who she does this specifically. This is her work, right? And I have a family member who talked to me about pelvic floor issues. I had no idea that it could happen. Like there's things that the human body, like, it happens to a lot of people, but if my aunt hadn't made a joke of it, what happened to her, I would have no idea. Like, so I love that my family is open and my family's able to talk about certain things. But yeah, so for the person that
Yeah,
posted,
and
Steve can put them in touch with me.
I'm dropping your email into chat, Laden, and yeah, for the person that asked that question, I think Laden would be a great person to just reach out to and do a little bit of brainstorming and maybe
Yeah.
but I love the idea too. The beauty of this new online world is there's got to be an online support group
Mm-hmm.
or maybe another great place to go. I know, again, you got to sort through all the opinions, but Reddit, like there is not which is an app. If you type in Reddit, Reddit, there's conversations there, everything under the sun. But that may be a place where you could discover a support group or a group you could connect with that could share some other ideas. At the end of the day, it's just um, being with people that are in the same situation can really help. So
Yeah.
the
So one of the things I want to mention is that horrible. COVID was horrible, but COVID did help us come to a better understanding of technology, the working from home, all of that. And when COVID hit, it would have never occurred to me before COVID. I would have only had in-person taboo talks. But when COVID hit, I created a Facebook community that now has 1,800 members, right? So the Taboo Talks and Thoughts page, a lot of times will have, when I had the talk on the pelvic floor and issues, I would post different types of pelvic floor matters, right? So we could talk about it on the Facebook community and then also come together and have a more organic conversation on the Zoom, right? But there are things that I have learned from researching topics to post and put that question out there. But as much as I do research online, what I learned from people adding to the comments is way, way more. So, for example, Asian hate, when that was happening, and probably still is happening, but when it was really on the news a lot, I did a deep dive on the history of that in this country. And there were people that are of Asian descent on the group that were posting saying, I did not know that even, right? I didn't know that that was happening. And then people were writing about their family experiences and things like that. So again, you can't learn about everything on your own without having dialogue with other people, right? And so, I'm not saying that everything I post on the Taboo Talks page is really educational. Sometimes I just put things like, what can you say at Thanksgiving dinner that you can also say in bed, right? So, or, so like funny little memes that people just can add to, but we've built a community where there are people whose children have autism that they can, or on the spectrum, and they can reach out to one another. There's friendships that have been made because we have common, things. There's a guy that posted that he was sick of me talking about my period and menopause and all in perimenopause, and it's very much like what we talked about here. Okay, well, you're free to jump off of that conversation. You don't need to be here for that. But for the 100+ members in the group that are dealing with it, it's very important that they have a place to ask.
Okay, and I saw that there's a question about your about the taboo. It's called Taboo Talks and Thoughts, and it's on Facebook, and I'm dropping in that link. Okay. I like this one too, that we've got here. It's bladder control is another topic that's very difficult for people to talk about. And
absolutely.
And again, it's sort of, a lot of it, I've observed this. It's like mom has or dad have a bladder control problem, and the adults, their kids don't want to hear it. Oh, I don't want to hear that, and therefore they're not exploring the solutions, or mom and dad might be ashamed, and it's one of those things that now. Lee has another comment there. She says, I don't have grandchildren, but I think elders need to talk about climate change. But what's interesting, Lee, I agree. Okay, Lee, when I started reading that, one of the things that I thought you would bring up, because I hear this from time to time, is that all my friends have grandchildren and they're always talking about their grandchildren, and I don't have any. And that makes me uncomfortable, or what have you. But just having an outlet, because as you can imagine, you got these dear friends and you go to hang out with them, and might be difficult to tell them, hey, can we talk about something else? And that's where brainstorming, how do I shift the conversation without being rude or what have you? Or how do I find a new group of friends?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, that's another topic, loneliness. It's not as easy to make friends when you're older, right? Some of the friends you've had for a lifetime have different priorities in life now. So,
yeah, in our solo aging discussions, of which we've got one coming up a week from this Tuesday, every time we do a solo aging discussion, it's about how to make friends, because I haven't really made new friends in 40, 50 years. Now I'm trying to do it. And, sort of you forgot how, or all your friends came through school and your workplace, and now it's sort of like, okay, let me get into this. But there's other people out there that are in the same boat and sharing those resources. This came in the beginning and I missed it. And I'm curious about this too. They were asking, so what do you want your celebration of life to be like? And have you done like any pre-planning?
Yeah, no, I mean, one of the really exciting things, because of the fact that I want to help others pre-plan, I've definitely thought a lot about mine. I have songs that are in my funeral playlist that I want. Some are like really, really like just funny, about grandma. A Rave in the Grave is the song. It's an EDM song. Like, I want people to play music and everything. Definitely don't want anyone feeling obligated to wear black. My mom has made it very clear that everyone must wear black. She said it just like that to me when she found out her friend's brother's funeral. The wife had said, please, everyone wear colors. Like, that to her was like the end of the world. I would love it to be a party where there's lots of stories. And I have already started picking out pictures for my slideshow because I don't want somebody else picking my pictures. But I went to an independent living place, had a woman that was a music therapist. And she talked about how on a lot of hospice plays music when that time has come. And I definitely want that. I'd like be able to outline what type of, I don't want a lot of medication. I want to be lucid if I am in hospice and all that. But she said that regardless of dementia and everything else, most Americans, if you play this song, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank in the name, but You Are My Sunshine. Mm-hmm. Everyone remembers the name, the words to You Are My Sunshine. And I thought about it and I'm like, oh my God, I know all the words, right? And so
and it's a positive, fun song.
Yeah, but she talked about how music, when you play it, will take you back to a time in life.
Yeah.
But as soon as she said that, I started thinking about like, if you pull up, I was captain of the cheerleading squad, right, in high school, and we would go to games and play Brown Eyed Girl. So I already picked out the pictures from my time as a cheerleader, right? And it will play with Brown Eyed Girl. Then my college song I've picked, my wedding song. Even though I'm divorced, I still want wedding pictures in my slideshow. So I am in the process of, I will have hopefully all of that set, along with other decisions, such as I still want a Muslim burial, even though I'm not super practicing. There are still some things that I want, but I'm going to modify it, and that it doesn't have to be within 24 to 48 hours like they mandate, right?
Yep.
I'm hoping to be living in another country. There's going to be, some time needed to ship me back. So, but yeah, these are the things
I don't want to. I want to jump on this question from Kathleen, and she says, somehow I thought the Taboo Talks would be more along the lines of what to do in situations involving the physical results of aging. For instance, problems with chewing and eating may result in dribbling food or other socially unpleasant problems. Then there's the really awkward, embarrassing instances, not being able to hold it with your urination, especially when somebody's a guest in somebody's home. These are taboo and rarely mentioned. And Kathleen, I'm not surprised that we migrated to death, because that's probably, when you think about it, it's the easiest. It's one of those things that's out there. But I love what you've thrown out, because to me, that was a total blind spot. And you, in having this discussion, you're really bringing up a very valid point. Okay. And in terms of, how do we, especially if, like, we're all, a lot of us are going to be visiting family, and there may be a family member that is, because of a cognitive impairment or a physical impairment, is at the table and they're drooling and what have you, how do we deal with that? How do we treat that person with the dignity and respect that they need to be treated with, because all humans need to be treated that way, and minimize the uncomfort that some might have being in the presence of something like that. You know, this is a
Yeah.
great topic to throw out in this forum.
So one thing I'll add is that I have my youngest has cerebral palsy. It's not a bad form of it. It is a thankfully she walks and everything else, but there are times where I feel like people don't know what to do. Like when we're going to a concert, she's in her wheelchair. People don't know, like, should I hold the door? Should I not hold the door? You know, like people get in their head about like, what does the person want? Right. And they're trying to guess. So I would say in situations where if you could have a conversation with the family member that maybe is going through something, maybe they're using a walker for the first time, maybe they are having some issues with chewing and whatever, maybe ask them if they want help to cut up the food more, or if they want help with the door open, because there are people that don't want you to open the door for them. They don't want the help. They're very stubborn about it. And so, and I think you're not going to know until you either get yelled at because you did something they didn't want. But I think all of the things that we're talking about, planning for end of life, planning for Thanksgiving dinner, all of it, it's all communication. It's not being afraid to have that conversation, because if you're communicating what you're, you know, like if you're saying to your loved one that you're okay with listening and hearing what they want, and asking them, they'll actually, I think, this is just me, but I think anytime you have an open dialogue, it pays off.
Yeah.
So try that. I had Bell's palsy years ago, and half my face, if anyone's familiar with that, but I couldn't close my mouth fully, and it caused drooling. And you know, you don't want to leave the house. I didn't want to leave the house, but I needed to go vote. It was important to me to go vote, and I still took pictures and everything else. But that was me being okay and comfortable. But there might be somebody else who will say, "I'm not going to leave the house until I'm back to normal," or so just, you know, find out and don't be afraid to tell them that you're beautiful regardless of whether, you know what I mean? Like say those things so that they're not afraid at Thanksgiving dinner, that they're not eating like this or sitting somewhere else. Just
Oh man. Ladan, Lee, I'm going to give you, a lot of people are getting gold stars today, but Lee, you've had some really thought-provoking comments. But she says, I want people to talk about me as though I was not in the room. Wouldn't that be amazing if like wouldn't that be wonderful if you knew what people were thinking and saying about you, and or like I guess that we wouldn't talk about people when they leave the room is another thing. Boy, you could do a whole taboo talk on that, because that's, you know, no matter where you are, like like in an office space or something like that, it's sort of like a meeting breaks up and can you believe he said that, you know? And it's sort of like he may not be aware that he said something that was not offensive. Lee, I love that as a thought-provoking exercise, is that can we live in a world where we never talk about somebody behind their back, you know?
Or could we live in a world where we've disrupted the funeral industry so much that people with terminal diagnoses are having a living funeral, that they are there to actually hear what people think about them, right? Wouldn't that be awesome? Like, I don't, if that was the way my path was, where I knew I only had X number of months or whatever, I would plan that funeral party and that, you know, event. I want to know what their thoughts were, what, you know, all these amazing things people say when you're gone. Did we remember to say it to them when they were alive? Just like what you're saying, right? So, yeah.
Now, we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I want to kind of this is great, and I don't know how y'all feel that are on here. I think this was our first time trying to do something like this, but I feel like this has been very interesting to me. So it may be something that we continue on more like a support group style basis, no agenda, and we just have people jump together. But before I want to make sure before folks jump off is Laden, your primary business is events. You do basically from sunrise to sunset. So you
Yeah.
celebrate people's births and you celebrate people's deaths. Is that an accurate
That is perfect. Yeah, life milestones. I do probably more taboo events than most event professionals. Divorce parties. I have something that I'm trademarking called vagina bration. My friend came up with that name, but that's for transgender women, but also first periods and menopause. I
holy
think we
cow?
should,
Oh,
yeah.
you've really capitalized on the taboo niche, but these are things, they're only taboo because we're not used to thinking about
Absolutely.
celebrating this. And
Yeah.
I'm aware of the vagina bration because I had a friend that went to that party for the individual that they were celebrating, and and I'm probably willing to bet it's the only party under that label and that's had. So
Yeah.
um
And
uh
I just had a client hire me to do stand up. So I got to roast him a little bit. And I have an open mic night that I would love people to come to. And yeah, so one
yeah,
tomorrow and one on December 2nd.
okay, and we can find out about all these at the Leave It to Me website.
No, it's not on the website, unfortunately, but definitely if people want to
Just email.
join Taboo Talks and Thoughts, there's information there on. I'll
Okay.
have the open mic listed there. And if the group's not for you, I will say that I don't get offended if people join and see that, okay, some of the conversations are just juvenile, whatever, that they don't want to be on. I won't take any offense.
Yeah, and also another great comment that I'm dropping into chat that is anonymous here. It says, "I have a family friend. She wanted her celebration of life. So at age 90, that's when the family gave her a celebration of life, and she's 100 years old now. But what a wonderful. We need more of that. We should." And we don't need to wait till we're 90 either. Like we could be doing these celebration of life whenever, just
Yeah.
telling people how you want to be remembered and having the opportunity to be present at that event. This is
Yeah.
fantastic. Laden, I'm thrilled. I threw out doing this. Somebody said Taboo Talks weekly. I think we're on to something here. I think that this can help raise the dialogue of aging topics. So I will put my thinking cap on.
And I really, really appreciate you having me on here, Steve. It was really fun, and you're always so good at asking the right questions and running these webinars. So thank you.
I love it. All right, we'll see y'all soon.